In the dim glow of a setting sun that painted the barren fields in hues of crimson and gold, Alara stood trembling at the edge of her family's opulent estate, her heart pounding like a war drum as the village elders pronounced her fate. She was no criminal, not in the eyes of the law, but in the cruel court of her affluent kin. Her body, soft and rounded, a canvas of curves that society deemed unworthy, had become her greatest sin. At 25, Alara had been labeled a burden, her obesity a stain on the family's pristine reputation, and for refusing an arranged marriage to a lecherous merchant who mocked her behind closed doors, she was now being cast out like yesterday's refuse. "You will wed the poorest farmer in these lands," her father declared, his voice cold as winter frost, "as punishment for your insolence and your form." And sir, with tears streaming down her flushed cheeks, Alara was handed over to Thorn, a man whose weathered face and threadbare clothes spoke of endless toil and meager means, unaware that beneath his humble facade lay secrets that would rewrite her shattered world. If you believe in the power of kindness and second chances, hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, share this video with someone who needs a reminder of hope, and don't forget to subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more stories that touch the soul. Alara's journey to Thorn's farm was a blur of humiliation and despair, the carriage rattling over rutted paths that seemed to mock her every bounce and jiggle. She clutched her simple sack of belongings, a few faded dresses that strained at the seams, a locket from her late mother who had always whispered words of love despite the world's judgments, feeling the weight of eyes upon her from passing villagers who whispered and pointed. Her family, merchants of fine silks and spices, had always viewed her as an anomaly in their lineage of slender, poised figures. Meals were portioned stingily for her, outings avoided lest she embarrass them, and suitors dismissed with laughter that cut deeper than any knife. Obesity, they said, was a choice, a laziness she wore like a badge of shame, but Alara knew the truth in her quiet moments. It stemmed from a childhood of hidden sorrows, eating in secret to fill the void left by a mother's death and a father's indifference, her body a fortress against the pain. Now, exiled to this poor farmer, she imagined a life of drudgery in a leaky shack, married to a man who would surely resent her as much as her family did. As the carriage halted before a modest wooden cottage nestled amid sparse fields, Thorn emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, his hands calloused from years of labor, his eyes a deep brown that held no malice, only a quiet curiosity. He nodded solemnly, accepting her without question, and led her inside where a simple meal of bread and stew awaited, steam rising like a tentative welcome. The first days on the farm were a torrent of physical and emotional agony for Alara, her body unaccustomed to the relentless demands of rural life. Dawn broke with Thorn already at work, tilling the soil under a sky that stretched endlessly, and he gently urged her to join him, not with commands but with patient demonstrations. Alara's arms ached as she hefted buckets of water from the well, her breaths coming in labored gasps, sweat soaking through her clothes and highlighting every curve she despised. The ground seemed to swallow her steps, mud clinging to her skirts like accusations, and more than once she stumbled, tears mixing with the dirt on her face as memories flooded back, childhood taunts of fat Alara echoing from schoolyards, the sting of dresses that never fit, the isolation of family gatherings where she was relegated to corners like forgotten furniture. Thorn noticed her struggles but said little, instead offering a steady hand to rise, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man who wrestled the earth daily. Nights brought no respite. In the shared space of the cottage, separated only by a thin curtain, Alara lay awake, her mind a whirlwind of self-loathing. Why had fate bound her to this? Was this punishment eternal, a mirror to her perceived worthlessness? She avoided mirrors, but the farm's reflective ponds betrayed her, showing a woman whose fullness she saw as failure, not the strength it hid. Thorn, sensing her turmoil, began leaving small gestures, a wildflower on her pillow, a warmer blanket when chills set in, acts that puzzled her, for surely a poor man like him had no time for such frivolities. As weeks turned to months, the rhythm of the farm began to weave its subtle magic into Alara's fractured spirit, though the challenges mounted like gathering storm clouds. The isolation gnawed at her. Letters from her family ceased after the first curt dismissal, reinforcing her sense of abandonment, and the nearest village was a half-day's walk, where stares and whispers followed her like shadows. Physical toil tested her limits. Harvesting crops under the blistering sun left her skin raw and her muscles screaming, each swing of the hoe a battle against her body's protests. Ilara collapsed more than once, frustration boiling over into silent sobs as she questioned her endurance, wondering if her weight would forever chain her to inadequacy. Yet Thorn remained a constant, his presence a quiet anchor. He shared stories of the land during evening meals, his voice low and steady, speaking of seasons that turned barren fields fertile, of seeds that bloomed against odds. He never prodded about her past, but his eyes held an understanding that unnerved her, had he too known rejection. Unbeknownst to Ilara, Thorn's poverty was a deliberate veil. Years ago, he had inherited vast tracts of land from a distant relative, thousands of acres spanning hidden valleys and fertile plains, managed discreetly through trusted hands to avoid the greed that wealth attracted. He chose simplicity, farming a small plot to stay grounded, but his true empire lay concealed, a fortune built on wise investments and compassionate dealings. Ilara glimpsed hints, a well-stocked pantry that seemed inexhaustible, visitors who arrived under cover of night with ledges and respectful bows, but she dismissed them as illusions born of hope. The turning point crept in like dawn's first light, subtle at first, then illuminating everything in its path. One crisp autumn morning, as leaves swirled in golden eddies, Ilara joined Thorn in planting winter wheat, her hands now steadier, calluses forming like badges of resilience. She had begun to shed pounds not through deprivation but through the honest labor that nourished her body and soul, meals shared with Thorn becoming rituals of sustenance rather than shame, fresh vegetables from the earth, hearty stews simmered over open flames. Her curves softened gradually, but more profoundly, her spirit stirred. Thorn's encouragement, woven into daily routines, chipped away at her walls. He praised her for the way she tended the chickens with gentle care, for the bread she baked that filled the cottage with warmth, acts that made her feel seen beyond her form. Suspense built in quiet moments, a lingering glance across the fields, a shared laugh over a stubborn mule, the way his hand brushed hers when passing tools, igniting sparks she dared not name. Yet doubts lingered. Rumors from villages trickled in during rare market visits, whispers of Thorn's hidden wealth, dismissed by Ilara as jealousy toward even the poorest. Her struggles persisted, nights of insomnia where old insecurities resurfaced, visions of her family's scorn haunting her dreams, making her withdraw into silence. Thorn noticed, and one evening, as rain pattered against the roof like hesitant confessions, he revealed fragments of his past, a youth marked by loss, his own body once frail and mocked for weakness, until the land healed him. Ilara listened, her heart aching with recognition, the emotional depth of his vulnerability drawing her closer, suspense coiling as she wondered if this connection was real or born of pity. Winter descended with a blanket of snow that transformed the farm into a crystalline wonderland, mirroring the slow thaw in Ilara's frozen heart. The challenges intensified, blizzards isolated them, forcing reliance on stored provisions, and Ilara's body, still adapting, rebelled with aches that tested her resolve. She pushed through, shoveling paths with determination that surprised even herself, her breaths visible in the frosty air like affirmations of survival. Thorn's kindness deepened. He taught her to read the stars on clear nights, wrapping her in his coat against the chill, their shoulders touching in a proximity that sent warmth through her veins. Emotion built steadily, each day layering upon the last, a rescued lamb nursed back to health together, symbolizing her own revival, arguments over crop plans that dissolved into mutual respect, moments of quiet where Ilara caught Thorn watching her with eyes full of unspoken admiration. She began to see beauty in her reflection, not in slenderness alone but in the strength of her hands, the curve of her smile. Suspense peaked during a fierce storm that rattled the cottage, power flickering as winds howled like forgotten ghosts. Huddled by the fire, Thorn confessed more, his wealth, the thousands of acres hidden to preserve his peace, acquired not through cunning but through years of fair trade and helping neighbors in need. Ilara's world tilted, betrayal flickered, but his explanation poured forth. He had accepted her not as punishment, but as a chance to offer what he wished someone had given him, unconditional acceptance. Tears flowed as emotions crested, her struggles laid bare, and in that vulnerability, love bloomed, raw and real. Spring arrived like a promise fulfilled, bursting with blooms that mirrored Alara's transformation. The farm, once a symbol of exile, now felt like home, her body leaner but her spirit vast, challenges overcome through perseverance and Thorn's steadfast support. They walked the hidden acres together, vast fields rolling like emerald waves, where Thorn revealed his empire, orchards heavy with fruit, herds grazing peacefully, all managed with the same humility that defined him. Alara marveled, not at the wealth, but at the man who chose kindness over ostentation, who saw her worth when she couldn't. Their bond deepened into a partnership of equals, planning expansions that included community gardens to aid the less fortunate, echoing themes of second chances. Emotions swelled in cinematic sweeps, sunrises over the lands they now shared, hands intertwined as they sowed seeds of future harvests, Alara's laughter ringing free and unburdened. She confronted her past, visiting her family not in anger but in quiet strength, their shock at her radiance a silent victory. Life unfolded in vivid scenes, festivals where she danced without shame, children looking up to her as a beacon of resilience, Thorn's eyes always finding hers in crowds, a silent vow of forever. As the story of Alara and Thorn reached its poignant crescendo, with fields flourishing under their care and hearts mended by love's gentle persistence, one couldn't help but feel the profound inspiration of redemption. Alara, once discarded as punishment, had discovered not just hidden wealth, but the riches of self-love and true connection, proving that beneath society's harsh judgments lay potentials waiting to bloom. If this tale of kindness, struggle, and triumphant love has touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know how it moved you, for every engagement spreads the message that second chances can change everything. Before we end, drop a comment below with the line, "Kindness always wins," if Alara's journey inspired you to believe in the power of compassion.